Okay, so for the wash we've got our usual mix. This is just Indian ink, thinned probably 90% into the colour cup, and away we go. Putting it through an airbrush purely because it's easy to get in here, so we can just literally airbrush this in. We want it to be almost puddled but not quite. Okay, and you put it in, and when you dry it back, it will dry back a lot lighter, but it will give you a nice, or hopefully, grimed effect. And obviously you can do floors a little bit more heavy, but it gives us a nice warm look in that cockpit area now. And as I say, you can perhaps pick out areas that are a bit stronger, so certainly floors, the side walls, perhaps where you'd get crew walking around. But if you dry it down, you should notice it will go back. It will cling into all the recesses and everything else. Where it comes into its own is something where you can see it a little better. So we've got this guy down here, so we're just going to come in. Okay, just like that. And we're going to dry back. So we're keeping it the airflow from above, rubbing down, and as you can see, it will lighten up as it goes. Really straightforward, nice and easy job, this one. So we can, whilst that's just drying, we're just going to come in and do this one. And as I say, this is the thing about lightening and darkening. People say about the paintwork being too light, too dark. I wouldn't worry about it, because by the time you do things like this, it all changes. Everything goes out the window. Okay, looks very dark. Give it a moment, that will come back to life quite nicely. So we're just drying back. You can see he's drying, but it will give us a nice sort of grimed, worn, worked, weathered look. Okay, so the seat's going to get it as well. And this is when I say about don't worry about if you've missed bits, because quite frankly we're going to go in. But the idea of putting this over the top of the dry brushing is that it'll knock that back because it's a little bit strong. Okay, so that's that kind of down there. We've just got to do this one here. Okay. But as you can see, this one here we did earlier, drying back very, very nicely. That'll lock in, it won't weather out, so don't worry too much about it. But even if you came in, if we do it here, going really, really heavy with this stuff, I mean really heavy like this, if you wait, and we'll just dry this artificially, it will dry back very, very light and give you a nice sort of warm, grimy look. And don't forget, we're not touching it, we're not having to brush it around or anything else like that. It just works really, really well. And as you can see, it's drying off now. And when you're artificially drying it like this, you see you get these spots in the middle. If you let it dry naturally now, you get like a tide mark, and those work really, really well. But as I say, if we just dry this in a bit more, you should notice just dry off, absolutely lovely, with no problem, you see. So don't worry about it if you think you've overdone it, it is not a problem. But what you should end up with, something like we got here, is a nice grime down that, worn type of cockpit and everything else. And the great thing with the Inkway, as what we'll do with this one as well, is that we can actually go over painted photo etch or printed photo etch, because it will just stain it without ruining it, and then you can just clean up the dials and everything afterwards. So there we go, that's those done. What we're going to do now, let that dry for around about half an hour till it's totally gone off and totally handleable. Go and have a clean up, clear this away, a few bits and pieces to do, and then we can get going with actually sticking and attaching the colour printed photo etch to all of the separate parts. Okay, so looking really, really good now. We've got this all completely weathered in. So as you can see down here, looking very nice. And we've got that sort of mixture of metal and grime and everything else. Looking quite good. I think it will all really sort of come together, especially when we get this colour photo etch on. Now, as you can see here, this is what we have. If I'm honest, I am not a fan of this stuff at all. I don't think it's very good, shall we say. I don't think the adhesive works particularly well, especially when you're in a situation where you stick this stuff on and it's in a tight area. You might find later on in life it peels off, and to be honest, I have found it's done this. That's why I usually back it up either with a little bit of CA glue, super glue, or with some PVA, just to make sure when it's down and nothing else happens. But there's a few little tricks I'll show you with that anyway. So basically what we've got here is a situation where we just need to go around and put all these things on. Now the most obvious one to do is the actual instrument panel. So what you want to do is very carefully cut this out, which is where your first sort of problem comes in. So we're going to do it down flat, and we're just going to use a blade. So we're just going to do the black one here. So normally you would do this on a very hard surface to stop it bending, but it's quite thick this, so we don't have to worry too much. But if you've got thin photo etch, you don't want to cut it on a cutting mat. You certainly want to do it on a hard surface, because what can happen is the cutting mat gives slightly, and then it'll end up giving you a dent or a bend or something like that. Okay, so once you've got it off, you should be in a situation where it will just literally peels off. Now on the back here you have an adhesive, okay, that sticks it. Now this adhesive, whilst it's probably very good at holding some bits, other bits, especially if you're on a curve, you've got no hope. Okay, so what we want to do is line this off. So I'm wedging it with my fingers, and this is where your other problem comes in now, because on a piece like this it's pretty straightforward. You can just really push the edges and get it all to sort of marry up. The trouble you actually have though, if you've got a part where you perhaps you made to maneuver it or slip it underneath something, because it's self-adhesive, it grabs. As I said, that one's not so bad, okay, but if we just cut out the forward plate, okay, or the bezels, then you'll see where you could end up with a little bit of a problem, because what happens is if you need to slide it around and to position it, it will grab. And the printing, and that's all it is, it's purely a quick printing job on these, does tend to peel, snap, or basically just come off. Okay, so that's that one off now. So this should just peel off the sheet. Okay, so all you've got here is your first one, and then your second one is going to go over the top. Now the great thing normally is that you can take your time and you can roughly sort of bend them round. And I said on this one it's very easy because it conforms, you can put your fingers around it and everything, and gives you what is a absolutely fantastic looking instrument panel. But if it's in a situation where it's tucked underneath, you need to slide it in, you can't get to the edges to hold it, to square it up, once it sticks it just rips it off. Okay, that's when I prefer to use a PVA glue. You can just smear on a layer of it, and then what you can actually do is sort of squash it into the area you want. It gives you a little bit of time. Okay, when you're happy with it, you can press it down, wipe off the excess, and away you go. This stuff, because it's on the flat, isn't a problem, but again, if it was on a curve or you had a bend in it, I would definitely put super glue, because I have visions of it lifting slightly over time, which is something I have found, especially with things like seatbelts, harnesses, which we have got for this one. The actual printed layer peels off sometimes of the actual metal itself, and again, it just doesn't look very nice. Come time, you look at your model and it's all peeled apart. It's a case of, you know, was it worth all the hassle of doing it in the first place? So there's our sort of instrument panel, and as you can see though, it really is nice. It's absolutely fantastic, okay? And this is why we're doing it. So what we need to do really is pop round and put all the other little bits and pieces on now. So we're just going to check our references to make sure we get them all in the right place. Okay, the first one we can do is pop down the one on the bottom, which is we've got these two little guys down here. Okay, and this is where we're going to come in and we're going to double it up with a little bit of super glue as well. Okay, now you could use PVA glue. I'm purely going to use super glue for speed on this one, but certainly you could use a tiny bit of PVA glue in exactly the same way. So we're just going to use a cocktail stick, and then all we're going to do is we've got it coming down for these two in here. Okay, so we're just going to grab a little bit of super glue and we're just going to put a dollop in and around these guys down here. Okay, and because you've painted over these, it's great because it'll really grip very well. And then hopefully with these, because we've done them, I tend to put a blade just underneath just to lift them off. Okay, and the other thing as well, whilst I'm having a moan about these, you can't grab them with tweezers because otherwise it sticks to your tweezers. So, you know, I'm not being sort of unkind to the photo etch sets, it's just that certainly from my point of view they can be a little bit more of a pain than anything else. So the super glue, what that'll do though is give you a little bit of time just to maneuver it down. Okay, so we've got this going on and we're just going to use a pair of tweezers to push each side of the dial we've got down here to actually push it on. But again, it's a nice go. The other reason for using the grey I did is that, to be honest, I had heard about people sort of mentioning that the actual colour photo etch is basically RLM grey XF22. So you're trying to match it as well, and sometimes when you've got colour photo etch, it's not the easiest job in the world to try and match it. Okay. Now the other way of doing, sorry, I haven't actually cut this one off yet, or if I have, I've done a particularly bad job. The other way of doing these parts, okay, which are pre-glued, is you can get yourself, if I've got it here, this is one of these wax rhinestone pencils. So actually what you want to do is you can, hopefully it will grab and stick onto, certainly this one needs cutting first to make it nice. Okay, so all you do every now and again, just give it a bit of a chisel job and it should stick, but because we've got glue the actual on me, it's not going to. Alright, but we'll certainly use it for other parts. I'll show you about that one later. Okay, now I want to get this in before my super glue dries. Okay, placing on, swinging it round, okay, each side of the actual bezel, and there's that one in, looking pretty good, very sharp. Okay, so what we're going to do now is literally go around all the others. There's various placements for them to go on. If we just pop another couple on, so we've got number 3, which is a nice small one to show you. If I can even find it, there's number 3, okay. This little tiny fella up here. Okay, so again, just nicking it off with a blade, like that. Now this guy actually goes around the control column. This one doesn't have any glue on it, which is quite handy because I can show you this now. So you just take your wax pencil like this, okay, and it sticks on, and that's the beauty of it, okay. And you can maneuver it round and all the rest of it, and hopefully it'll hang on there. If you don't, it's going to fall off. Okay, let's just grab it again. I just put it over here. So we're going to need a touch of super glue. So we're just going to grab a little bit of super glue. As I said, less is definitely best with all of this. Okay, just going to pop it up and around here. Taking our bezel part, you can pick it up, come along, and hopefully not do what I just did and drop it right through. And you can just pop it into place. Would help if we had the first layer on. Excuse me, I'm getting well ahead of myself. We just get the other one on, which is 32. Now this one is sticky. Alright, so all we're going to do is just going to come along, pop him on top. As I say, we've got a mixture of super glue and the actual glue itself. So that sits on there just like that. Now we can take our little friend, and this is where I'm going to use the trick with the PVA glue. So we're just going to grab a tiny bit of PVA glue. Okay, we say tiny bit, we don't really mean that, we mean quite a bit. We're just going to poke it round in that entire area just like that, so it completely fills it. Then we're going to take our little bezel, flip it over, grab our, we can pop it down, we can use our little stick, pop it in. Now the idea is we're going to squeeze it, and as you can see you get a sort of dome on the actual part itself, this bit here. Now the idea being is once it's all dry and everything, it will then come along and give you the look of glass on that particular bezel. Okay, and that's the point to it. So when it dries back, we should have a very nice looking part. So that's that one on, that's those done. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go around the rest of the cockpit and attach these all in. So obviously exactly the same process for this one down here in the back. There's a couple going to go around in the back. The cockpit, the control sides, all of that are all going to get this little bits of the colour photo etch on there to really bring it to life. Okay, so cockpit is looking really nice. Hope you agree. Yeah, there's a few more touches got to go in there. We've obviously got to put the base plate in, but we want a nice leather effect on that. But generally, I think that's really worked out very well. And we've got the inside parts down here Okay, looking pretty good. So now what we got to do is that old problem with bombers and things like that is all the glass work, especially with the He111, because it's all glass at the front. There's windows all over this particular guy. So we've got to take care of that. There's a couple of different ways of doing it. We've obviously got the masking set for this, which will help out quite a bit. You can obviously do liquid masks and all the rest of it, no problem, but you've still got to put the glass in there in the first place. Now, it's quite handy when you've got like a seal running all the way around. That way, if you get a little bit of glue mark in there, things like that, it's not too much of a problem. Okay, but from our point of view, we don't have that. The glass actually butts right up to it. Also, the trouble is you've got things like we got down here, these tiny little windows. They're at a funny angle, trying to slant them in and all things like that. So we need to get those in. So I've done a few of them and we've done the other side already, but we're just going to run through what we do. First of all, clean up of your clear parts, all right? When you're taking them off the sprue, always leave a gap. The idea with leaving a gap is sometimes when you're using nippers and scissors, when you do it, you can crush the clear part and it will shatter, okay? And then you get a crack go up into your clear part, into the actual glazing area. So always be a little bit mindful of it, and also be careful, like on this one, it's on a slant, so if you are taking it off, make sure you cut it at the correct point. What I like to do is roughly get it in the area, then I'll use a knife, and we're just gonna come in and we're just gonna cut it in nice and flush. Okay, using a knife way is just a little bit nicer because it stops it all going everywhere. Okay, so fitting them in. There's lots of glues out there. Obviously we use crystal clear. You can just use a normal PVA glue. What you want to avoid is like the weld action glues, because otherwise it's going to fog it, okay? The other thing you can do is things like this stuff. This is watchmaker's cement. Used to use it. The trouble is though, it's like the old fashioned tube glue. You put it down, you get strings of it come off and everything else. My given technique for doing it these days is to use a little bit of microsol crystal clear, okay? We have an upturned pot. And then all we're going to do is literally come along, grab some water. This is just plain tap water in the bottle here. So we just give it a spray. Then we're just going to take a bit of a brushful. Okay, just pop it in here. And then all we're going to do is just turn this into a milky consistency and thin it down. Now you could use, as I say, any PVA glue to this. You don't need to use microsol crystal clear. It's just that this stuff's got a little bit more bite. Now, good way is that's too thin. You see when you scrape back, it's just there. What we need is a little bit more glue. So just put a bit more in there like that. Because you're looking at it to be the sort of consistency of cream, really. Or that'll be my way of doing it. The other thing as well, if you've used this technique before, make sure you clean the pot out. Because otherwise what can happen is you end up with that situation where you've got a skin that you can't see because it's crystal clear, and then what happens is that when you put this on top, it rehydrates it. You get stringy bits and things like that, and it doesn't work. So now you can see how you're getting the drag factor. That's a lot better. That's more what we want. Now you could let it dry out a little bit just to get a little bit thicker as you go. I'm going to take a little bit more, just another bit of a brushful. Okay, because I want it just to be sort of single creamish. All in there just like that. Okay, so when you're in like that, you've got your clear part. Now these bottom ones down here aren't so bad on here, but if we're honest, made a little bit of a faux pas, because when you've got this area in here, this framework, this foot panel down here, obviously it's very close to get them in. And when I say close, it's to the point of you really have to wiggle it to get them in. Once they're in, it's no problem. Now, traditionally you might pre-glue the area. So you come along with your glue, put it down there, then put these in. Because I've thinned it, we can do it back to front. So actually what you've got is your part just down like this. And then we're just going to pop our part in the hole, making sure it's pushed in properly and everything else just like that. Okay, then when it's in, you just come along with this stuff, and all we're going to do is like capillary action, touch it down and let it go everywhere you want it to go. And because this will dry literally crystal clear, hence the name, you shouldn't have a problem. But you see, I've done these other ones already. They've only had one coat the same as that, and then what I like to do is just go around and give them a second coat. Just remember, being PVA glue, it is not as strong as your traditional glues, so they will push out if you accidentally get your finger on the other side of them and areas like that. Okay, so just be aware of that they're a little bit more delicate. The nice thing about this is, two things why I like to use this way. Firstly, if you ever get a problem where perhaps you get fluff or dust or something like that on the inside, you can really easily get this out, okay? Because all you do is you either cut it with a knife or just push it hard enough. You can push them through and your job done, okay? And then that way you can get in there, take out the fluff or whatever the problem you've got in there, and then that way what will happen is that you can then just put the glass back in, reseal it up, and away you go. Alright, so those are those in like that, pretty straightforward. Then we've got to put in these other glass bits, so we just start at the front and making sure you've got them around the right way, because there is a bit of a top and bottom to these. Okay, so you want them in. Feel on the outside to actually see how they are, okay? Make sure they're flush, make sure they're pushed all the way in. So again, exactly the same way, we're just going to come in with our glue down both sides and let the capillary action do all the work, okay? And let it all flow around and get in and everything else. Now the great thing about this is, if you watch previous videos of me doing this, is that you can get that situation where perhaps you've got a little bit of a gap, shall we say, and let's face it, most models do. What that actually do then is act like a bit of a gap filler, and also you won't have to worry then certainly about having any problems with things getting through, so perhaps having washes and stuff like that flowing through, because it will completely seal this up and we won't have any problems with it. And if you do get any on the glass, you don't have to worry too much about it. Okay, I'm just going to flood it so it fills it all up. Alright, so we've got two more to go in. If I just pop these both in together. Okay, see, that one doesn't feel exactly brilliant. No, it does. Okay, and that's the thing, I'm not flipping it over because I don't want it to fall out, because obviously these aren't the best fitting, shall we say. See, but they just need a bit of a wiggle to settle them in, but you can feel them on the back side to make sure they're okay. So we're just going to do these. Okay, exactly the same way, but as I say, don't worry too much about getting any on the glass, because it will go nice and clear and you won't have to worry too much about it. Okay. Once this stuff's gone off, it is pretty durable. Don't think when I'm saying about, you know, it could fall off and you can push through. It does still take a little bit of welly, but until it's totally gone off, it is pretty soft. Okay, so perhaps you might want to do this as that last thing before you finish for the day. Alright, but what I tend to do is 2 coats. So like at the moment, all of this has got 1 coat, apart from this one down here has got 2. But then what we're hoping is these other guys like this, that'll be no problem, they'll dry through. Once they're dry, we put that down quite carefully over there, you should end up with something like these. Now these are just still drying off a little bit, got a little bit still wet on this one, he's had another coat, but you might be able to look at them and see they're all in there and absolutely fine. Okay, as I said, we have the full masking set for it. One thing I would recommend though, which I didn't mention, which I just should have done, is to pre-spray the entire framework first before you put the glass in. So for example, on the front end here, you can see how we've got all these painted. The idea being is that this is done as well, so you don't have grey plastic showing through the glass, especially on the nose. All too often you see guys and they've done amazing models of bombers, but you've got a ring where the glass goes on the front of styrene colored plastic, and that's really a bit of a shame. Okay, so if you pre-paint it first, the glue's got good bite, it'll stick to it, and away you go, have no problems with it as well, like that. The other thing it does do very well, if your masking isn't exactly brilliant, and let's assume perhaps you're going to go with something like which we might have a go actually with some mask oil. Okay, if you did accidentally get a little bit onto the plastic, okay, and not the glass for whatever reason, when you peel it off, instead of it having a glaring piece of, you know, grey colour plastic staring at you, it will be the base colour. So actually you could call it weathering. And one little technique I used to do a long time ago, I haven't done it for a while now, is I would pre-treat these areas silver, so it'd have like a primer coat of silver all the way around the frame. That way, if it did accidentally get a bit over, it would look like chipping. And let's face it, you always get it around glass and things like that, and you could go in there and just do little scratch techniques to clean them up and give them that sort of effect. So technically what you're doing is hiding a slight cock up, shall we say. Okay, so you've made a mistake, your masking's in wrong, you've gone slightly over with the mask oil, didn't notice it, whatever, okay, take it off and you've got a nice chip instead of having plastic, and then you've got to try and touch in. As we all know, trying to touch in a small area on an airbrush model never really works. You can see it, it's like a glaring mistake. So then you end up having to mask off the glass again, respray it in, and you're just making a lot of work for yourself. So by doing it this way should really help you out, no problem at all. So what you're going to do, let those totally dry, as we said before, okay, and everything else. The other thing as well, when you do this, always clean your brush out pretty sharpish, because otherwise it will go rock hard. So we'll just pop that out over there. And the other thing as well, as I said, let's clear the mat whilst we're at it, is that we can actually get this all off the back of the lid, because you don't want it to contaminate other methods you use, but I use the back of the bottle lids all the time for various things. Okay, so next up, the tail wheel. Pretty straightforward, it's just a little bit all over the place, all right? So you've got two halves of a tail wheel to go together, so we're just going to pop him in. If we can remember how. Okay, so we just grab the two halves of the wheel, and then let's pop these together. Let's have a little bit of stud flash on there, but it should melt those in. Okay, it doesn't fit exactly brilliant, probably see you've got a little bit of movement going on in there. So all we're going to do is come on. And once you get a little bit of glue in there, what tends to happen is the weld action will melt all of that in. So we're just going to use a couple of clamps. Crash. Okay, one on that side, one on that side, just to pull them together. Okay. Then we've got this framework system down here. Now the way that that goes in, when you look at the instructions, you can see down here, doesn't look too bad, but it's very, very weak. People I've been speaking to have built this one as well. They all say the same thing. It's an extremely weak way of doing it. So just be careful as you're sort of fitting all of this in and getting them all in there. As I said, this one already, just during cleaning, is all bent and everything else like it. So what we need to do is just let that bite. Hopefully it's got that now. We can pop the wheel on. Okay, and what we're going to have to do, unfortunately it's why I hate these wheels, is we're going to have to paint it whilst it's on. Okay, which is a real pain to do. Okay, so just looking at this one, just making sure, all in there, all happy. Okay, so this guy is going to want to fit in here first. It doesn't mention anything in the instructions about it, but I'm guessing it won't matter. Okay, so we're just going to come in, plenty of extra thin in between the layers. And once we're in, we don't really want to touch it with our hands because we're going to get fingerprints on it, so that's why we use scissors. So we're just going to pop them in, get a grip. We can clamp on this side, might be better. Okay, just a little bit more glue down those edges. And then this guy is going to fit in. So we're saying it's all very clunky and fiddly and everything else. Okay, we want this wheel to rotate purely so I can clean it up afterwards, alright? So we just pop that one in. And then we've got these two guys, which are going to go each side at the top, making sure we've got a flat side down. Okay, a bit of glue on both sides. Okay, just double check. One and two. Which again, why it has it like this is beyond me. Why it just didn't mould a thicker bit at the top. So we've got that in, just come in with some more. Okay, pretty good. Alright, so we've got this guy on the back which we need to fit in. which I was wondering probably the best way of doing it. It's going to go into that top part and then out. What I'm going to do is I think it would be easier to glue it into this part first, this one. We just see which way up it goes. Okay, so the ring one goes to the bottom with the open, I assume. Must be. So that just fits in the back there like that. So we're just going to pre-glue the hole, and then we can set it in and come in with the rest of it. But as I said, this is a particularly weak part of this kit, so just do the back and the front to completely weld that. So what we're going to do, let that bit dry off, clean up the tail wheel and go in there, and then we can get that fitted on. And then what we can actually do is get the cockpit installed into one half or this half. We can bring the two halves together and get cracking with the wing section.